Hey, Patreon contributors, thanks for joining us in what is probably going to be a much larger conversation than the actual regular review of Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay.
I guess let's try to do this in maybe in the order that it happens.
Yeah.
Holy shit! All these people are fucking like weird. I don't even want to say they're like religious fanatics because I feel like they weren't terribly religious people that all had these visions and the situation that brought them together. But I mean, there was enough to make them believe really fucking strongly that they had to be the messengers to the people that could save the world.
Yeah, and like you would think that typically it would be like true believers would be the ones that were sent to do a like apocalyptic message. Can we get it out of the way? Obviously, they were the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yep.
All right. In a very like reluctant. They were the four reluctant horsemen of the apocalypse.
In a really weird modern way too.
Yeah.
Like, because none of the four horsemen of the apocalypse were like responsible for like tectonic plates shifting.
Right.
So, because that would have been a terrible name for one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
The tectonic horsemen. And
like the Richter scale horseman, something.
All right. That's hilarious. Yeah. Like, it had to be, and they, there was the flashbacks that kind of, or not even the flashbacks, but like when they were explaining themselves and how they got like, roped into this, they kind of talked about the things that they went through, but like we never had the like objective, like it wasn't like a chapter dedicated to what Leonard went through that convinced him. It was always word of mouth, which I think was very intentional, because if there's one thing we know about Paul Tremblay, he likes ambiguity.
Yeah, he does. So I want to talk a little bit about O'Bannon and your thoughts on this. So do you think that was the guy that had attacked Andrew? No, I'm sorry, Eric. Eric was the one that was attacked, yes. Yeah.
No,
so
I thought it was Andrew that got attacked.
Was it Andrew? Maybe it was Andrew.
Yeah.
Either way, do we think that's him, or do we think that was something that either was because of his concussion or something maybe supernatural put that idea in his head? Or
I didn't fully believe it, but I believed that everybody believed enough that was good enough, if that makes sense. Like, as far as everybody cared, it was Jeff O'Bannon, whether it actually was or not. Like, they had mob mentality, like, they retconned the whole, like, it was Jeff O'Bannon, not this Redmond character. But there wasn't enough. I mean, it was really just Andrew's word, his memory.
Right. But the thing that's interesting about that is that if it's O'Bannon, and we're gonna ask the hard questions during this spoiler talk, but if it was O'Bannon, it leads me a little less to believe that it was true. And by it was true was, the elephant in the room, right? That there is the apocalypse.
Right.
And that the sacrificing of when Andrew or Eric by their own family was what could stop it. Putting someone in from their past into that mix,
leads
me to believe a little less in the whatever wrathful God or whoever we want to say is responsible for these visions and the disasters in the book.
I mean, it could go either way too, because like he could be the red herring to make you specifically not believe it as much, So he was like, his character was written specifically to muddy the waters about whether there's really an apocalypse happening or not. But again, like there's nothing, and that's kind of one of the neat things about the way this book plays out is in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and there's no cell reception or anything like that. So like, aside from the television, there's no connection to the outside world to verify any information. And even the television stuff is brought into question about how reliable that is. So we have to just kind of go with our gut about whether Redmond was Jeff O'Bannon or not, and I don't fully believe it.
Right. I guess let's start here. Do we believe that the
apocalypse was happening?
Yeah.
Well, the TV evidence was a little bit strong, and again, he did a good job of making it ambiguous enough, like with
the bird flu being a pre-recorded,
yeah, like that kind of thing. But the planes falling out of the sky was pretty damning evidence. Like, I mean, just statistically, if two planes crashed in the world on the same day, like two major crashes happened, that would be statistically significant, I believe. So the fact that they saw something like 7, that's pretty serious.
Yeah, it is. And you know, as a reader, I want to believe, because you know that's the whole thing. They talk a little bit about shared hallucination, and stuff. I mean, when I say they, I mean the characters bring it up. So obviously Paul, you know, discusses it a little bit in his book, but I don't know, man. Like, I'm really leaning towards that was that all was happening, and then that, you know, if that was all happening and they were led there and told, then the sacrifice of one of them would stop the apocalypse.
Yeah, and
I mean, that's the way I read the book.
Yeah, and so, like, I guess my question to you is, like, I'm sure that you played it both ways. Like, you asked yourself, well, if this is real, should they make the sacrifice or shouldn't they? I'm sure you asked yourself that. What was your thought on that?
You know, I don't know if I asked myself if they should have. I was with them the whole time on them not doing it. Like, I totally got why they weren't doing it. And in my mind, I don't know that I played out a scenario, but essentially my thought would be that it's so unbelievable and that decision is so hard that you don't want to make that decision. So you've got two ways you can go, right? So at the one point, one of them is willing to kind of sacrifice himself, because we talk about it now, right? When has died.
Right.
So I could see, you know, the guilt, the overwhelming guilt, taking over, and then him making that sacrifice. Now, the thing is that the ending was super ambiguous, right?
Right.
Which I know you thought was going to bother me.
I really
But,
did.
you know, it didn't, because I got the feeling it was going to be. All I can say about it is this. It's not even that I'm disappointed. I got exactly what I expected. I would have really liked anybody who wrote this book. I get the feeling it would have ended the same way.
Yep.
But I would like to see that risk taken, that you actually
land on an answer.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen that. And again, I wasn't expecting it. It ended very much the way I expected to. I didn't expect Wen to bite it. That was pretty
fucking hell,
right,
man.
Yeah.
Did I message you when I got to that point?
Yes.
It was such unfortunate timing too, because I had read later than I had wanted to, and so I was like, well, I'm going to get to this section ending, and I'm going to call it a night. And the section ends very clearly with her getting shot, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to wait until tomorrow to fucking continue reading to know what's going on. And it was a gut punch, and it was like, oh, I can't believe that just happened. So yeah, that was
so I want to give him all the credit in the world for doing that, because that was a pretty ballsy move. Because I honestly pictured this ending with the three of them intact, and if not, with Wen making it out alive. So regardless of the ending being really ambiguous and no commitment one way to the other, or if the whole story was true, that's still a pretty big that's a pretty big decision to make as a writer.
Yeah, it's a big balls move, and it also like has a significant impact on the way the story plays out. Because I'm not a parent, but I have to imagine that if like in this really fucked up situation, my main focus is going to be making sure that, you know, my child is okay in this insanity. And the moment I lose that child, faced with the potential apocalypse, I'm not going to care if I survive. Right? So in my mind, I'm thinking like, losing the daughter would make them either A, completely unlikely to go through with it at all, or just give in because they don't care anymore, because they don't have their daughter anymore, and just go for it, whether or not the apocalypse is going to come, sacrifice one of themselves or each other. So it was a big move as far as like what's going to happen in the plot.
So I should put your question back to you. Did you think they should make a sacrifice?
Oh no, I mean, like, I've always been I've always leaned toward the let the apocalypse happen in my mind, and obviously like it's an easy it's an easy position to take when I know for a fact that like nobody that I care about is going to die because there's no apocalypse happening. So like maybe in the moment I'll be like, well, maybe I don't want Livius to die just because I'm in a bad mood or whatever. But I was the whole time I was with them like, fuck the world. If this is the way that the world lives or dies, does it really, deserve to keep going on? That was kind of my take. The very Cabin in the Woods movie, you saw that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like that ending kind of echoes like how I would feel about it. Like if this is what we have to do to save the world, is the world worth saving?
I think that they also weren't, how do I say this? I can't fault them for deciding not to, because as we had discussed, the evidence they were given was pretty shoddy.
Yeah.
Now, if they would have would have somehow had visions, you know what I mean? There might have been a different dynamic, or I might have thought differently. Like, man, you guys have all the signs. You're going to die along with the apocalypse. So, especially once the kid is dead, like, the right thing to do would be. But yeah, they're presented with such shoddy.
Yeah, it was a ham-handed presentation, and they even like it acknowledged it's like the book acknowledged. I mean, I'm sorry, the characters, the horsemen acknowledged that they weren't doing a great job of like telling them how important everything was. And so again, that shows that like uncertainty, that ambiguity, that fucking Tremblay. If there's one word that you could walk away saying this book like really leaned on, it was ambiguity, because like I wouldn't believe these people. I wouldn't even give them the time, to talk about what was going on. I would be as aggressive as anybody else in that family was, because like they weren't getting it across. They sucked at being the horsemen.
They needed a PowerPoint presentation.
They needed, at least like, one, star wipe to another screen or something like that. They didn't have any of that.
No, they didn't. They depended on bad things. I will say that the other scene that was really, really stood out for me, it was really great, was when they kill Redmond.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
Because here's how that gets presented, right? Like one of you, or you guys need to pick one of you guys to sacrifice, or all this bad shit is going to happen. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And they're like, all right. And then Redmond puts on that little fucking sock over his face, and they fucking kill him. And now, if you didn't think they were serious before that, that's at least when you start believing that they believe. Because up until that point, it just sounds like a weird, like, hey, it'd be really fucked up if we go and tell this family.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It seems more like a prank is probably not a strong enough word, but you know what I mean? Like this, let's torture somebody.
Like a sadistic game. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But then they just fuck Redmond up, and you're like, Jesus, man, these people are pretty serious about this. And I thought that was a really great scene, because it really changed for me how I viewed them, because up until then I was super skeptical on what they were saying. I believed that they believed it after Redmond died.
Yeah, that was a very stakes raising moment. But again, they killed the fucking least likable dude. And if I'm these other people, I'm like, hey, if I just wait this out a while, maybe they're going to kill them. They're going to kill all of them, and then it'll be easier for me to get away. So like if this if this apocalyptic persuasion situation was a game of cards, you just keep checking, right? Like
correct.
Like in poker, like we're just going to keep checking until until there's nobody left. But then they throw in that whole like, if everybody dies, it's too late. You can't save the world anymore. So like you have to. I would let 3 people die before I made a solid decision, no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. But yeah, so you say that. Well, but let's really think about this. These people are clearly crazy. And the thought that at some point they're going to turn on him and kill him is a possibility. They're still being held hostage.
Yeah.
So you're. I think they all did the right thing. I think they did what any normal person would have done. Was the first chance they got, he makes a break to the car, he gets the gun, he whatever, instead of just waiting it out. Yes, logically on paper, we would say waiting it out's the right thing. But
Right.
when you're sitting in that situation, there's no guarantee that that you don't go before the third person does, or the second person, or whatnot. Or in Wen's case, after the first person.
Yeah. So, yeah, dude, it's a really and after that, I thought this book was going to be fully based on just the suspense of like, this story playing itself out. The brutality of killing Redmond really threw me, and I was like, oh wait, is that what we're doing now? And I thought that maybe this would carry out as a theme. But he kept it. It was like kind of like ebbs and flows. There was like ups and downs. Like it wasn't all brutal. It wasn't all suspenseful. It played out practically like how I would imagine it would happen in real life. Like it's not always just one thing, or it was a mix of all these different things happening, which I thought was really good.
Well, there's all these surreal parts, right? Like we've got you all tied up, and now we're just going to go ahead and clean up the mess we made breaking into the cabin.
Yeah.
Which,
like in a movie, that would have been the creepiest scene, because
Sure.
like if they were just so casually, doing chores after they'd caved someone's chest in with a fucking homemade weird fucked up weapon.
Yeah, and those weapons are just I mean, there's a lot of stuff at play there, because they said that he designed the weapons the way he saw them in his visions, like just this kind of weird, like take a rake and then bend the tines around.
So what do you think about the Light Man?
Well, there's the Light Man and there's the flies, right? The flies are the other thing that I don't know. See, that leads me again back into the supernatural element, right? So he sees these things as a sign from, and we'll just say God, right? I don't know
Sure.
what the entity is that was causing this, but for generic terms, we use God. The God was trying to help them out and say, look, I want you to know these people aren't crazy, so I'm going to show you some shit that you'll see. And again, that could be backed up by the concussion. But by the time you get to the flies crawling all over I think you could throw that out the book and give some legitimacy to that is put there by a supernatural force, by God.
See, and I'm the exact opposite on that. It's funny that we're like totally disagreeing on this. I saw the Light Man as like more of a concrete, because like he interpreted it, and even Eric had trouble in trying to figure out what he really meant, or like what he really felt by it. But like I saw the Light Man as being the manifestation of like the good or bad that was about to happen, and I believe that more than the flies. I could easily write off the flies as a hallucination that happened because of a serious concussion, on top of the fact that you're like basically in shock from like losing your daughter. So I thought the flies were really dismissible, but I thought the Light Man was a little bit more, more leaning toward being possibly spiritual. So
that's fair, and I can see that.
But
I'm on We're All Dead because they couldn't fucking do the right thing. That's where I'm at. I mean, when I really have to sum it up, if you put a gun to my head to decide if there was apocalypse or not, I'm going with apocalypse.
I feel like there was an apocalypse. And again, like for me, it hinges on the planes, and I think that might be a little bit of like a, it's weird that it all comes down to the planes, but for me that was like the bridge too far or whatever. Like it's not, that is beyond like reasonably explained away. So combined with all the other stuff that was going on, I feel like there was an apocalypse, but I'm like, all right, you go for it, guys. You get to watch the world burn, and like they get to live, right? Like they have to survive, and they have to watch the world like die, is what I understood.
I don't know how that works. I will say this though, and I hate to bring up just a terrible real world situation. I mean, did we not have here in this country 4 planes go down almost simultaneously at one point?
But that was planned.
Well, but my point is, I mean, couldn't it have been 7 planes?
Yeah.
without
I see what you're
explanation.
saying, like,
You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, when you mentioned it earlier, I was thinking about it, and but I just wanted to throw it out there that
So it could have been a terrorist act.
could have been. And like I said, we had 4, right? So we had the 2 at the Twin Towers, the 1 at the Pentagon, then the one that was crashed by the passengers on the plane, essentially. But that's 4. And that's more than halfway to 7.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Right.
that 7's outside the reach of,
Right.
But
You got
then
me
again,
there.
one of them actually brings up that it sounded like maybe there were more planes that could have gone down too, from the news report and stuff. But yeah, no, I'm still, I think in my mind, this book works best because it really, if you think about it, if you believe about the apocalypse, it almost changes the dynamic, right? Like the 4 horsemen kind of become the protagonists.
Because they're
really
just trying to do
they're
the right
legitimately
thing,
trying to
but they don't know how to, and that's the
PowerPoint.
thing. Like they don't understand PowerPoint.
Yeah,
They obviously haven't taken any kind of God didn't recruit the most persuasive people in the world because
there were no motivational speaking classes for any of them.
right, there's those people in the world where they could talk you into anything, and obviously none of these 4 are that. So yeah. It was lame.
What I would have liked to have seen was in their backstories, like a thread of penance, because then I could have bought the O'Bannon thing too. But there was only his story potentially had, because we didn't see any of his backstory, like from him.
Right. They died so fast.
That they've done things, and that's why they were called upon. Like, this is your redemption.
Was their redemption. I was almost expecting that too. Yeah.
And quite honestly, O'Bannon, I mean, I'm not saying that if it was O'Bannon, what he did wasn't awful, right? But it's not like he murdered somebody. You know what I mean? He hit the guy in the back of the head with a glass or whatever it was. So the penance for that being like you have to save the world or die in the process of trying would be a little steep.
Yeah, that's a harsh sentence.
So, anyway, I think that's all I've got. I'm glad that we're kind of on the same page about a lot of this. I felt like we might diverge a little bit in our opinions on some of these things.
Yeah, I guess I just want to tie it up by saying that we've read plenty of Paul Tremblay stuff before. Swallowing a Donkey's Eye, Head Full of Ghosts, The Disappearance of Devil's Rock, this book, and then some short stories here and there. Oh my God, this is by far, at least to me, the most fucked up scary book I've ever read by him.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree with you that yeah. It had the biggest stakes, right? So
yeah.
To top of that, I don't know. I would put this at a draw with A Head Full of Ghosts.
With Ghosts, yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
But ahead of Disappearance at Devil's Rock.
Yeah.
So,
because that was more mystery.
Swallowing a Donkey's Eye is just it's really hard to quantify that book with these 3.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not in the same category or whatever you want to say. Yeah,
I do like. I guess I'll save this. I'll save this for the regular podcast. So.
That's spoiler talk, and I feel like we definitely probably did almost as much spoiler talk as we did normal book talk, dragging it out. At
least.
I'm really happy with the direction that Paul's going in, and if he keeps this shit up, we're going to be reading some really excellent books for a long time, is what I think.
I agree. Thanks for being a loyal Patreon subscriber, contributor, patron, whatever you want to call it. We promise more spoiler talks in the future. I know we skipped last week's, but definitely something we enjoy doing when it merits doing it. So what we don't want this to be is us talking about stuff off the podcast just to have somewhere to put it for people to pay to hear it. So as it merits, we will be back. And until then, thanks for being our loyal patron.